Hello, welcome back. This is Daria at 3x Point. In this video, we're going to be looking at a concept called views. Right, let me bring up my slide and let's have a little bit of discussion about what views are all about. So what's a view? A view is a saved SQL query. Sometimes it's also considered as a virtual table. Okay, so before we go into all the other details, let me quickly bring up my SSMS. And let's say, for example, I'm going to take this away. So let's say, for example, I've written this SQL statement, and if I execute, we have all this data back. And what this statement is doing is, let me move this down a little bit, move this to the left. Okay, so what this is doing is we're selecting data from this table, we're joining it to employee table, and we're also joining it to person, and also joining to this. We're joining to a whole bunch of tables. And don't be confused by seeing a bunch of different join statement here with the on clause. All these things just come as a result of the business requirement, what the business wants. So in this case, what the business actually wants is to be able to have a table that has all the data in one, as if we have an unnormalized table. So ideally, if we had this kind of data in an Excel file, we will say it is an unnormalized data, or we can say it is an unstructured data. But because it is now in a database, we go through normalization and we split the tables into several other tables, and that's the reason why we have all these different tables. So but to present the table in an unnormalized or unstructured format, we need to join all the tables together and have a bunch of tables like this, and we can use this for reporting. So if you work as a data analyst or a report analyst or any of these analytical roles, you might find yourself in a situation where you have to write SQL queries like this and deliver reports on a daily basis, because data changes, the business wants to see the latest data. So the same query you ran that gave you, let's say, 17 rows yesterday, you can run it today and you have 30 rows because the data changes. So you have to keep running the query on a daily basis to get the latest data, and you present them in a report format like this. So in this case, let's now say we want to put this query into something that you don't have to always write this long SQL query. So we can then introduce a concept called view. So it's just a way of saving all these select statements into just one table. Now, this view is not a table, right? It does not exist at a table. It does not keep data to the disk. It is just virtual, and that's why some people refer it to as a virtual table. It does not exist on the disk of the server, so it does not take any space at all. All it's doing is just saving this select statement. All right, so let's say, for example, I create this statement and I want to save this statement in a view in this schema, which of course, if you know that if I don't specify this DBO, it will create it in that schema by default. So if I run this query now and say create view, and this is the syntax, you use the DDL to create it by saying create view, and then you specify the name of the view. So this could have been anything. I specify the name, and the next thing you put there is as. That's just the syntax. It is not alias. I repeat, it is not alias. It is just the syntax. Okay, so we're saying create view, this name of view, as this bunch of statements. Now, if I now want to reference the view, I will say select everything from, then the name of the view, which is this. And you can see we have that data back. So rather than writing all this statement, if I have saved the SQL statement inside a view, anytime I need data back from the view, I don't need to write any join, I don't need to do nothing. All I need to do is just run this, just execute the view, and that's it. Simple as. Now let's talk about the advantages of having a view. So we know what a view is, and we know that it's a saved SQL query, and it's sometimes considered as a virtual table, right? So what do we need it for? Number one, it serves as a mechanism to implement row and column level security. So what do we mean by that? Let's quickly go back and have a look. So let's delete that. Where's that view that we just created? Actually, we have to go into views. So you won't find it in tables because it's not a table. So you need to go into views to see the view that we just created. So if I refresh this, that's the view that we just created. So I'm going to delete that. Okay. And if I select this now, you would see that it doesn't exist anymore. Right. So I brought back my view, the select statement that created the view. So if I select everything from this table, so what we have is, oh, come on, right. So you can see that this select statement contains a whole bunch of data, a lot of things, right? So let's assume that this statement is going to be used by some low level staff in the company. They will be presenting reports regularly with this view, right? But there's some data that we don't want them to see. So let's say, for example, we don't want such employees to see the address of the people involved in this table, like the employees. We don't want the person or the staff that will be using this report. Ultimately, we don't want such staff to see the address data of the employees on this table, because I really want you to get that clear, right? So we don't want them to see the address. We probably also don't want them to see the phone number. And let's say, for example, this NI, which is a national security number, national insurance number in the UK, or in the case of United States, like I think they call it social security number. So if such data was on this table, we can actually do something like this by removing such columns. So address is part of the column we don't want to see. City, this postcode, and if social security was part of the um, columns on the table, we can remove it. Remove as much as you want and just limit it to only the data that we want them to see. So phone number as well, we don't want them to see. And given all of this, we can now create the view, right? So the data is now returned because we already had select view there. So let's select the view again. So this is it. So now you can see phone number type is there, but not phone number. So we can actually remove this. We'll get into that in a minute. But you can see that address has been taken away, and the phone number has been taken away. So this is what we mean by a mechanism to implement row and column level security. So we can just leave the data we want them to see. So that's security. And you know already that if you go into the underlying table, which happens to be the employee, the entity, sorry, the employee, the person, the address, and all these other tables. These are the underlying table. They do contain the data. The data is there, but in the view it's not. So we have removed part of the columns on the underlying table and then put them in a view and given the view to the person that will be working with the data ultimately. So they know the name of the view. In some cases, they can't even get to the statement that made the view. So there's no way they can actually go into this statement, this original statement, to know what sort of statement were used to create the view, right? So because there is still security as far as SQL Server is concerned. We will get into that later on. I mean, if you go into security, you can see logins and you can see, let's say, for example, this essay. If you go into the properties, you can see that there's something called server roles, and this has sysadmin. So if you didn't have sysadmin, for example, and all you had was public, you wouldn't be able to see these kinds of things, right? So for someone who doesn't even have the right permission to see the statement that was used to create the view, there's no way the person would know what's going on within this view. All they know about is just the name of the view, and all they can do is just to return data from the view, and that's it. So it's a very, very fantastic way to implement um, column level security. And what do we mean by row level security? In this case, we have 17 rows returned. If all we want for them to see is just probably just 5, or a set of data, we can just say now we can have like a where clause. So let's drop the view and start over again. That actually takes us to this. So this last one that says to modify a view, we can use the alter. To drop, we can use the drop. So in this case, we're actually going to modify it. So let's change this to alter. So alter view. Now we want to modify the view and say select from all this table, remove the semicolon, and say where business entity ID, which is e dot business entity ID, e dot business entity ID. What operator should we use? We could say in. So let's say, for example, we just want them to see data for some specific people. So 274 277 280 288 and 290. So let's say we only want them to see this, and we can execute. And now if we run the query, you can see that it's only returning exactly what we specified: 274 277 280 288 and 290. So that's it. That's all about views for now that you need to know. There is a little more which will be in terms of encrypting views and some other parameters and some other options that could be used within the view, but we'll leave that for advanced SQL. As far as the basic SQL is concerned, this is enough for you to know about views. All right, thanks for watching. See you in the next movie.